So, picture this. I'm sitting in our usual coffee spot, the kind of place that's got that weirdly comforting hum of espresso machines and quiet conversations, and I managed to say something I absolutely shouldn't have said. You know that split second when time just stops? Like everyone's frozen in this weird tableau, and all you can hear is the loud thump of your own heart? Yeah, that was me, right there, biting my tongue far too late. It wasn't just any random gossip I blurted out. Nope. This was a secret. One of those cross my heart and hope to die kind of promises we made. And there I was, with my mouth running laps before my brain had a chance to catch up. I caught myself mid-sentence like an idiot with my eyes locked on Jake, who was sitting across from me, frozen too. His face? Let's just say it was that perfect mix of disbelief and that slow burn. Why, man? Why? Look that friends usually give each other when stuff goes sideways. Ever had that gut-dropping uh-oh moment? The one where you know you just messed up so badly that you wish you could disappear, teleport, or at the very least invent some kind of time rewind app? Yummy, right then? And the worst part? We were in this tiny coffee shop crowded with familiar faces, Sarah and Emily just a few feet away, both looking at me like they'd just seen a car wreck happen in slow motion. Now, this wasn't just embarrassing, it was bad. Like, could totally change the game bad. Jake had sworn me to secrecy, like seriously, locked and loaded hush mode, all because the secret involved something about him that he'd rather keep locked deep inside his own brain. Something that wasn't exactly cool in the traditional sense. I'm talking ground shift your world kind of weird, the type of thing that could turn Jake's laid-back rep on its head. And honestly, being the guy who let it slip felt like standing on a sinking ship, waving around a flare that accidentally spotlighted the whole thing. What's worse is that it wasn't just Jake who got caught in this mess. Emily, his little sister, and Sarah, our mutual friend who usually likes to stay out of drama, were right there when the secret left my lips. Their faces were priceless, like they just got handed the juiciest plot twist of a TV show and suddenly had front row seats to the awkwardness unfolding live. I wanted to crawl under the table. Or maybe that's exactly what I did mentally while everyone kind of sat back waiting to see what would happen next. Because I knew, I really knew that things just got serious, and whether this bombshell meant the end of my friendship with Jake or just the start of a very messy conversation, well, only time would tell. Jake has always been the kind of guy who wears his chill attitude like armor. You know, the type effortlessly cool, laid back to the point where nothing seems to ruffle him, the guy everyone thinks has life figured out. But beneath all that, there was this one weird little thing he guarded like it was the crown jewels. Not some big tragic secret, but something just personal enough to make him nervous whenever it tumbled even close to the surface. Now, I'm talking about Jake here, but I promise it's not because he's boring or anything. It's just that this secret was, well, unusual, and definitely not the kind of thing you'd expect someone like him to be hiding. So naturally, when he let me in on it, we swore ourselves to total silence. No leaks, no slips, not even a hint, because if word got out, the ripple effect would have been, let's just say, quite dramatic. Emily, Jake's little sister, fits into our mix as this bubbly tornado of energy. She's young, sharp, and somehow manages to be a constant source of teasing without actually crossing the line. She's also probably the only person who can get under Jake's skin without him blowing up, which is no easy feat. Then there's Sarah, the third musketeer in our little circle. Quiet, observant, and typically allergic to drama, she usually shrugs off most of our adolescent nonsense. But when it comes to stuff involving Jake, especially the secret, she's got this protective streak that shows she's not just some bystander in our trio. So these three of us, Jake, me, and Sarah, alongside Emily, formed this sort of tightly knit crew, inevitably caught in the gravitational pull of that secret. It was our unspoken rule that the secret stayed locked away, because if it escaped, it wouldn't simply mess with Jake's reputation. It would rattle the entire foundation of how people saw him, and that includes all of us. The stakes? Higher than you might think. Jake's got this laid-back reputation that's almost legendary in our suburban bubble. Everyone knows him as that cool, composed guy who's got everything together. But this secret, once unleashed, would shatter that image like glass hitting pavement. And it wouldn't just embarrass him, it would change how people interacted with him. Suddenly, the chill guy everyone admired would become a subject of whispers, awkward glances, maybe even pity. And seeing Jake through any of those lenses? Yeah, it felt like it could complicate things way beyond usual friendship drama. The tricky part is none of us really knew how or when that secret might come out. We were all careful, or at least we tried to be. But the truth is, secrets, well, they have this nasty habit of sneaking out when you least expect it. Especially if the setting is just right, if the people around you aren't quite paying attention the way they should. But man, knowing how vital this was to Jake just made the pressure all the heavier. I mean, it wasn't just about friendship loyalty or respecting a trust, it was about protecting the guy from a fallout that had the potential to ripple through every corner of our social lives. So naturally, that's why the moment where the secret slipped out felt like the air getting knocked out of a room and everyone freezing like deer in headlights. And honestly, when you consider how close we all are, with Emily throwing in her sharp quips and Sarah's typically not my problem vibe, it made that accident of mine feel even worse. Because now it wasn't just Jake who was vulnerable, my blunder had dragged the rest of the group right into this awkward mess. I couldn't quite guess how everything would play out. Would Jake sulk and distance himself? Would Emily tease him mercilessly? Or maybe Sarah would try to smooth things over without making a fuss? None of it seemed predictable, and to be honest, I was just bracing myself for the fallout. The kind of fallout that might break the easy rhythm of our group or, worse, put a chasm right between me and Jake. And that's where the stakes really hit home. Because in that moment, with the secret now an uninvited guest in the room, I realized this wasn't just some minor slip-up I could laugh off later. It was a full-on test of a friendship that had seemed unbreakable until it wasn't, and all I could do was hope that whatever happened next didn't burn the whole thing to the ground. So, how did I actually find out Jake's secret? Funny enough, it wasn't during some epic talk between us or even a whispered confession. It was pure dumb luck. We were hanging out at his place, just messing around, and Jake's phone buzzed with a notification. Naturally, in my usual nosy friend syndrome, I leaned over to sneak a glance. Only, the message wasn't exactly something you'd expect Jake to have on his screen. It was from some dating app, or more like a very niche, let's say, quirky app, and the whole thing flashed right there, his profile, offbeat hobbies, and yeah, the part he was mortified would get exposed. I froze for a second. That familiar uh-oh knot wrapping tight in my stomach because now I held this weird little bomb in my hands. I immediately snapped my head back, trying to act normal like I didn't just see a window into Jake's world he kept locked away. But here's where the universe decided to throw in some extra awkward seasoning. That night, Jake invited Sarah and Emily over too. We were all settled around the kitchen table, sharing some snacks, laughing at the usual stuff when I, accidentally let the secret slip. Not in a subtle way either. No, I literally used a phrase straight from that odd app's profile to crack a joke, assuming no one would connect the dots. The silence after my comment stretched on for what felt like an eternity. I glanced over at Jake and caught him mid-breath, his eyes wide, mouth slightly open somewhere between shock and betrayal. Sarah and Emily's faces were priceless. Sarah's mouth was frozen like she'd just seen a ghost, and Emily's eyebrows shot up so high it was almost comical. Jake shot me this look that was both, "What the hell, man?" and "Dude, really?" I tried to backpedal immediately, stammering something like, I didn't mean it like that, but I might as well have been speaking in tongues. The damage was done. After that, things got tense. Every attempt I made to joke my way out of the situation just made it worse. Jake wasn't mad in some loud, fiery way. No, it was the cold, quiet treatment that really stung. Conversation got clipped, and jokes died as soon as they crossed his lips. Sarah tried to steer things back to something light, but even she seemed nervous, like walking on eggshells around what was now a fragile, awkward bubble. Emily, being the wild card she is, tried to break the ice with one of her trademark teasing comments, but instead of laughing, Jake just gave her a look that turned her into a quiet little storm cloud. It was painfully clear that my slip-up wasn't just a small blip anymore. It had dug a pit between me and Jake. Over the next few days, I kept trying to find ways to smooth things over. Texts to apologize, offers to meet up, even silly memes to lighten the mood. But Jake kept his distance. Not ghosting exactly, but definitely cooler than usual. The weight of what I'd let out settled heavily between us. Every time I thought about how our friendship, one that had felt so rock solid, was suddenly fragile, I wondered, had I just burned the bridge for good? Would Jake ever trust me like before? Or was I now the guy who cracked open the mess he'd worked so hard to keep behind closed doors? I was stuck in this swirling mess of guilt and the hope that somehow, maybe, just maybe, time would heal the awkward silence I'd created. But part of me was bracing, waiting for the moment when Jake would finally say something that made it clear this was over. And I could only wait, listen, and try not to screw things up even more. A few days after that disastrous night, Jake hit me up out of the blue with a simple message. "Can we talk?" I won't lie, I spent a solid hour debating whether to respond with a joke or just own up to being an idiot. Guess which one won? Yeah, the honest, nervous version of me. We met at that same coffee shop where everything unraveled, which felt kind of symbolic, right? Sitting there across from him, I braced myself for the worst. But what surprised me was the way Jake started. Not with anger or disappointment, but something way more real. "So," he said, fiddling with his coffee cup like it was some kind of lifeline, "I'd been thinking about the whole secret thing. Honestly, yeah, it stings that it came out, and yeah, I felt exposed. But I get it. It wasn't like you did it on purpose." There was this brief pause, like he was weighing how much to say next, and then he chuckled softly. "You know what's crazier? All this time I was worrying about what people would think. Turns out, the people who really mattered already knew, or they didn't care. I let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding and found myself laughing too. It was awkward, sure, but it was also kind of freeing. Suddenly, that mountain of guilt I'd been carting around started to shrink. But here's where Sarah and Emily come in because their reactions flipped the script in ways I never expected. Sarah, being the avoid drama at all costs type, actually sat Jake down a day later and just laid it out. Look, nobody's perfect. If they cared, they'd stick around. If they don't, screw 'em. Plus, now you're kind of a legend with that secret in the mix. She has a way with words, that one. Emily, on the other hand, took a slightly different approach. She turned into this cheeky cheerleader for Jake, teasing him in the way only a little sister can. At first, it was brutal, like full-on roasting sessions that had Jake rolling his eyes but secretly cracking smiles. But beneath all that teasing, there was this unmistakable support. Emily made it clear that the secret didn't change how she saw her brother, and honestly, that mattered more than anything. So, how did all this affect our little group? Well, after the initial fallout and some serious awkward silences, things started to settle into a new rhythm. Jake and I found our way back to the easy back and forth we'd always had, though with a slightly larger awareness about when to zip it and when to joke around. There were moments where the secret would pop up in conversation, usually when someone said something completely unrelated and everyone would freeze before cracking up. It's like this weird bonding ritual now. In reflecting on the whole mess, what stuck with me was how messy trust and friendship really are. Secrets might feel like ticking time bombs, but sometimes letting them out, even accidentally, forces everyone to confront what's really important. And if the friendship's solid, it doesn't just survive the blast, it might actually come out stronger, weird quirks and all. That said, yeah, things still get awkward sometimes. Like every time Jake pulls out one of those weird niche jokes or references from that secret world, I get that little grin and a remember when you basically tattooed this on my forehead. You'll vibe from him. But honestly, after all that, those moments feel less like landmines and more like inside jokes we've earned the right to share. So, all in all, the secret spill? It wasn't the end, it was just an unexpected twist in the story of a friendship that's way too real and apparently way too human to ever be perfectly smooth. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way.